L'energia non si muove da sola. C'è chi ogni giorno la fa viaggiare in tutto il paese attraverso il cielo, il mare e la terra. L'energia non alimenta solo il presente. C'è chi da anni ne guida la gestione per dar vita a un futuro veramente sostenibile. Perché l'energia è un diritto di tutti. È il nostro dovere ogni giorno. Terna, Driving Energy. L'energia non si muove da sola. C'è chi ogni giorno la fa viaggiare in tutto il paese attraverso il cielo, il mare e la terra. L'energia non alimenta solo il presente. C'è chi da anni ne guida la gestione per dar vita a un futuro veramente sostenibile. Perché l'energia è un diritto di tutti. È il nostro dovere ogni giorno. Terna, Driving Energy.
civiltà dell'amore Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Crisis or recovery? What are the keys to development? This is a question which was at the basis of all the economic and political events that we held here at the meeting, because yesterday as well, when the Prime Minister Draghi had his speech and the dialogue with the political party leaders, or the event with Gentiloni or other speakers talking about the PNRR, the question has always been, what will happen in the future? We had positive periods with the growth of the GDP, but there are still many huge question marks for the future. And the first one that we can think of is the increase of the price of energy, which challenges the existence of many small and medium enterprises. So this question at the end of this meeting is very interesting, also looking forward to the future. And we have here many important speakers that can help us providing some answers for the short, medium and long term. So first of all, Giancarlo Blangiardo, President of ISTAT. So thanks for being here with us. Then Marco Ceresa, Group Chief Executive Officer of Randstad Italy, one of the biggest companies in Italy. And then Roberto, Giacchi, CEO of Italiaonline, who will share with us an overview of what is happening on the market in Italy. Then another guest, very important guest for the meeting, Giancarlo Giorgetti, Minister of the Economic Development. And Bernardo Mattarella, CEO of Invitalia, which is a public tool for investment. So he will tell us what may happen within this framework. So the debate will be split in two parts. A first part which will take 8 minutes each, and then a second part for 7 minutes for each one of our speakers, according to their role. So let's start with the minister. So you're not only the Minister for the Economic Development, you also had a huge experience at the government, a huge political experience. So I'd like to ask you a very challenging question. So crisis or recovery, what's happening, and if there is a crisis, how can we overcome that? First of all, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to come here to the meeting, even though, of course, what I say here at the meeting will have huge consequences on the social media for years. However, with all my speeches, I always start from the title. So the title here is Crisis or Recovery. So it's a very challenging question. There is no answer So we know that there is a crisis coming from the pandemic, that we already kind of absorbed that. There's been a recovery already, and it's enough to check the GDP data from this point of view. But then something else happened later. So what are the keys for the development? This is the second part of the title. And in my opinion, this is part of the title of the entire meeting, Passion for the Person. And why am I saying that? Well, basically, when I started working within the Ministry for Economic Development, the first thing I said, and I'm still very convinced about this thing, is that economic development does not depend on the Ministry for the Economic Development, but it is strictly linked to that mysterious role that we can define as a businessman. So basically that person, a person that because of his or her passion, being very brave, facing a lot of challenges, is somehow able to face the issues and to overcome them. Someone will succeed, someone will fail, but this is the real key for the economic development. And I thought that it's very important to move from the Ministry for Economic Development to the mystery of economic development. So how the economic development actually becomes reality, especially in a period like the one we are living in, where there is a lack of continuity for the economic history, because many of the paradigms that we were taking for granted are no longer there. Year after year, they're disappearing, starting from the concept of the globalization, that for sure will still be there, but not in the same way that we were used to know over the last few years. So, for example, the WTO, which seemed to be kind of a monster, bringing all a series of decisions that were having an impact on the life of the companies, and suddenly disappeared. So this is the reality, and this is the reality who changed the approaches of many people that used to study macroeconomy, and people were taught how to deal with the concept of demand and offer. While recently we are focusing on the issue of the offer, and this issue, the offer, shall be reviewed, completely reviewed, starting from the human factor. That's to say, from the person, which is named in the title, within the title of the meeting this year. If I had to analyze from an objective point of view this situation, and starting by focusing on the data, according to which the economic development is developed on the businessman, well, we can say that this businessman nowadays will have to face huge challenges. And this is the result for sure of the pandemic, but also of the Ukraine war. The conflict for sure is challenging the entire sector, even in an even stronger way than the pandemic. And then we have to consider also the price of the raw material, which is growing, the availability of the raw materials, and the energy prices, as well as the energy availability. And somehow this situation met all a series of further decisions that we have to take into consideration, which are, for example, the energy transition and digital revolution. These are decisions that were taken before the war started, and nowadays, with the Ukraine war, they make the size of the issue even bigger for the real survival of the companies. So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes here just to say that while getting out of the pandemic, we were dealing with a very good recovery period, but nowadays the situation is much more challenging, not only for the families, but again for the companies. And what I stated since the very beginning, it is that we are now facing a period of economic war with Russia, because we declared an economic war against Russia with all the sanctions. And we had to be aware, and I'm addressing that to Europe, the entire Europe, we had to make sure we understood and we were aware of the consequences of the rules that we decided in the past, but today they are no longer good rules, because they are the main allies of the commercial war against the gas coming from Russia. And here I would like to talk about the requests for the price cap that we put forward, because if Europe doesn't understand that they have to change those couple of rules, they're playing the same game of Russia in this kind of war. And secondly, if these rules cannot be changed, because there are some European countries opposing to that, we cannot avoid facing another very important topic. So how can we help families and companies to overcome what may become the next September, next October, a very dangerous step forward? And to this purpose, Europe, as it's already been done during the pandemic and the lockdown period, Europe shall consider this aspect from a different point of view from the rules that are already in place at the European level. And if we won't be able to succeed in doing that, I'm afraid that our poor businessmen that are struggling to survive, thanks also to the support and the resources allocated by the state, well, I am afraid they won't be able to succeed. And for this reason, answering to this kind of question that you are asking me, I can only say that I'm very confident. I really trust in the in the Italian economic system in order to overcome this crisis. But we need to create the conditions in order to make sure this potential can be developed. Otherwise, if this won't happen, and if as politicians we won't be able to create the framework to develop this situation, we shall really be concerned. And in order to be even more concerned, I'd like to focus on the long term. So Giancarlo Blangiardo, you are the president of ISTAT. You are working in the demographic field, so you have been talking about demography as a key element, as a key topic, not only for your job, but also for the Italian development on the short, medium, and long run. First of all, thanks for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here and to share with you some figures. So I'd like to share some figures with you. So what is it happening and what will happen from a demographic point of view? Just a few information. On the 1st of June this year, Italian citizens were 58,870,000 people. In 10 years, so on the 1st of January 2032, there will be 57,628,000 people. So 1.2 million less living here. So please consider that since 2014, we already have lost 1.3 million people. If we have a look at what will happen within 30 years, there will be 5 million people less. If we consider the next 50 years, there will be more than 11 million people less than today. So we want to be a big country, but a big country shall rely on a big population, because Luxembourg, for example, is a very rich country, but it's not a big country. Today, at a global level, we are scoring at the 24th place within the rank of the global countries. Within 30 years, we will score at the 38th place. So this is the dynamic which is going on. This is the dimension of our country. But the population, people, of course, people are producers, they are consumers, and they are feeding the economic system. So why is this happening? What is the reason behind that? One of the main reasons are the fact that there are more people dying than people born. But this was the situation also before the pandemic. So this is not only due to the pandemic. So let's have a look to the birth rate. Over the first 5 months of this year, we can say that during the first 5 months in 2008, there were 232,000 children born in Italy, while this year, this figure accounts for 149,000 children, so 100,000 children less, so minus 36%. So these are real data, real figures. Well, this is not only due to the pandemic. Maybe we'll talk about that later, but what is the real reason behind that? There are also less women that may have children, and we are now paying the consequences of the years where there were when few children started being born. Today, people between 20 and 76 years old account for 36 million. And in 30 years, there will be 8 million people less within this range of age. So we need to do something about that. There are consequences for this phenomenon. So talking about the GDP, well, of course, the GDP in 2020 was deeply hit by the situation, but then we started recovering, and we demonstrated to be a very proactive country, which is a very positive aspect. So we need to be kind of optimistic about that. And the consequences on the GDP, the consequence of this demographic situation, considering also other aspects like the labor market and other factors. So what will happen due to the change in the number of people living in our country and the structure of the age of the people living in our country? So today the GDP accounts for 1,800 billion euros. In 2070, it will account for 1,200 billion euros. So that's to say 560 billion less. So 32%, a reduction by 32% of the GDP just due to the demographic change. Of course, we can fill this gap with the labor market, increasing the number of women working in the labor market, and so on. There are many factors that can play a role, but of course, this is a very important element to be considered. And being aware of that in advance, we need to look for a solution. And the other important aspect is the demand. Of course, if the population changes in terms of structure, so more people with higher age or different kinds of people living in our country, of course, will lead to consequences. So we tried to play a little bit with this data so this is not a scientific approach, but just to give you an idea, I tried to focus on the population structure, the number of families, and to apply some parameters according to which for example, the first adult of the family accounts for 1, and then the other adults account for 0.5, and children account for 0.3, just to establish the consumption potential of the family. So playing this game, we can determine the consumption unit of the population at the general level. So from 41 million and a half units, we moved to 40,200,000. So minus 2.2% at the national level in terms of potential consumption, just due to the demographic change. And this is even dramatic. It becomes even dramatic if we consider that from a local territorial point of view. Again, a few figures. If we consider the islands, these change accounts for minus 7.5%. In the south of Italy, minus 6%. The center of Italy is minus 5%. Northwest plus 0.6%, and northeast plus 0.5%. There are some regions in Italy, like Basilicata, who are losing 11% of production capacity. Sardinia, 9%, Sicily, 8%, Puglia, 7%. So you see how the demographic change will actually involve all a series of elements which are very important. Let's consider the GDP, for example, and the change in the figures that I'm just talking about. What will happen if the debt will not change? So, in conclusion, we are facing some potential future scenarios which are not science fiction, because when I'm talking about 4.5% of change in the children born in 2022 is a real data. In 2021, we had 390,000 born. If we keep on having this trend of change, this year we will account for 385,000 newborn babies. So this will be a new record in reduction. Of course, we need to do something, because otherwise the alternative will be not to be able to recover from that. From an economic point of view, the minister was saying that something has been done already, but from a demographic point of view, there's still much to do. So we really hope that with all a series of measures and interventions, something can be done, but we need to believe in that and work hard for that.
Allora, il mercato.
So the labor market, does the labor market help? Does it represent an obstacle? How can it influence global growth? Yes, first of all, thank you very much. Whenever I come here, while I listen to the other speakers, I always learn lots of things, and that helps me in my day at my company. So as regards the labor market, the GDP is growing, but it is growing also because people work. It is a fact that over the last 1 year and a half, the number of new employees, we at Randstad, the ones are brokered by Randstad, but in general has increased. The main difficulty was basically that of identifying, selecting the people with the necessary skills, with the skills necessary and needed by the firms, the skills that firms are looking for. Out of 2 requests we receive, we are able to fulfill just 1, because the other one cannot fill because of lacking needs. So one of the biggest challenges is first and foremost to find people and then train them. This is what we've done over the last 1 year and a half. We do not know what awaits us. If we were to look at recent data in the month of August, in August 2022, requests have gone up compared to 2021. So apparently, no major crisis in terms of labor in the labor market is expected. However, things might change quite rapidly. So we do not know what lies ahead. It is, however, important to point out that people should always be very careful. They should not think that their income and the fact that it remains stable over time depends on contracts. That's a very flexible and variable and varying element. This is something that we see in the automotive sector. There are factories, there are plants that produce components for diesel engines, but diesel engines are no longer requested. Consumers are now demanding components for electrical engines, and therefore you have to still be competitive. Your skills need to be interesting. And besides that, there should be a whole system in the country that makes Italy attractive for multinationals, for them to invest in Italy. Italy should be a country that attracts investments. Of course, the main task is carried out by entrepreneurs, but at the end of the day, it is also multinationals who decide where to invest and where not to invest. People are looking for working stability, and at the same time, they're also looking for work dignity. The percentage of contracts with limited duration is not growing, but it is still very low. So, but what people are looking at is also the dignity in their work. Over the last 1.5 years, we have seen that wages in Italy have not gone up in Italy as much as in other European countries. This has made our companies very competitive. The growth in demand we witness in Italy, we register in Italy, is higher than the one we see in other countries. However, we still have to check up to the moment up to which we are capable of maintaining this. One of the things we have noticed is that if wages are increased, competitiveness goes down, while if we remain competitive, well, then investments remain high, and therefore we can still continue to offer a lot of work to people. We, as Randstad or companies, can carry out a major guidance activity. It is only by employing lots of people and maintaining them at work that you can help maintain the GDP high. Within Randstad, we have seen that if you give more money to people who have children, you can incentivize, you can stimulate the birth of new babies. So, but that's not enough. Beyond money, beyond more resources, there should be other elements that can help promote new births in Italy. Randstad pays nurseries to its female employees, and then for 6 years we provide a significant contribution, 1,000 years for each newborn child. So we're trying to do our best so that our people actually do babies. About 80% of women work at Randstad, so we do our most in this respect. And we have registered a slight increase in the birth rate here at Randstad, but that is still not that important. So we have to see what we can do to solve a demographic problem, but also to support births. There's one thing that is always thought-provoking for me, which is that about 50% of the newborns are girls, baby girls, and actually it's only baby girls, only girls who in the future are likely to give birth to children. So in the future there will be 200,000 young women capable of giving birth to children. So this opens up the big issue of migration, as well as the issue of being capable of maintaining here the best people here in Italy. The NRRP is an element of confidence for us because it also gives us the ultimate direction towards which we should invest in the field of education. And one of them refers to the IT and digital world. The IT and digital world is considered as a separate field in everybody's world today. However, in the future, it is expected to become an increasingly integral part of our work. Controllers will have to be able to create their own software. Also, those who work on tool machines will have to be able to create their own programs. Therefore, at school, we should be able to introduce in the school curricula these kind of elements. That's particularly important. So, advertising is the mirror of how companies are going. So the floor to Roberto Giacchi. He works in this field. What's the situation in your view? Thank you very much and good afternoon also on my side. I would also like to start from the title. As the Minister said, I would like to agree by saying that there is no answer, or at least there is a different answer. And this answer is that there is a coexistence between crisis and development. This is something that we should never forget. As we have some development, we also have to see who is benefiting from that development. I believe that the world of advertising is particularly useful to look at in this respect. Since the breakout of the pandemic, up until the invasion of Ukraine, many things have happened in this field. 2 crises have taken place. And if you consider that advertising is very much related to these events like advertising, that crisis might be repercussions, might have repercussions on advertising. 2 crises are particularly important. So we've also had a third phenomenon, a negative phenomenon. That is to say, the fact that the competitive position of major global platforms has become stronger. These are typically not Italian, they are typically not European. In most of the cases, they are American, they are from the US. In the world of advertising, these 3 phenomena, so in the first year of the pandemic, advertising, investments in the field of advertising, especially in traditional media, have suffered a lot. So investments, for example, in television, in the media, in the printed press. So the market share has gone down. However, in spite of this, in 2020, investments in digital media have remained more or less stable, or the figures registered at the end of the year have been positive. Then in 2021, a recovery has taken place. Both investments in both traditional media and in the digital media have significantly increased. This growth has enormously strengthened the sector of investments after a year in which investments had kept pace. And the drop registered in 2020 of advertising investments in the traditional sectors has not been compensated. So 2021 ended with the traditional market going down compared to the digital market, which on the whole has gone up. So on the whole, the market has come back, has registered again the values registered before the pandemic. The situation is far from being rosy. This is a very difficult market. This is a market in which investments in the digital sector are significant. They're huge, and the growing share of these investments is financing companies and paying the wages and the taxes of countries which are not Italy. So here too, even within a general framework of development, as in our sector, there has been a transfer of wealth from Italian investors to investors and companies based in other countries. As regards 2022, the year has on the whole started quite well. In January and February, recovery has been significant, has been remarkable. And then, due to the uncertainty linked to the war, due to the inflationary pressures, especially hitting SMEs that are weaker compared to bigger companies, and then due to the further additional difficulties due to difficult supplies, especially for some sectors and some companies in some areas in Italy, namely the south, the situation has got worse. This is a difficult year. It is very uncertain year. It's difficult to predict at this stage whether we're going to register a plus or a minus. This will depend on how the three aspects evolve. In other words, uncertainty, inflation, international supply chain, and uncertainties linked to the international supply chain. However, we should never forget that in a sector like that of like the advertising sector that is capable of keeping pace, especially in the digital sector, there are still moments of crisis and situations of crisis. Part of the wealth that is being created is no longer here in Italy, but it is being transferred to other countries and to other companies. Thank you very much. So, we've often said on the occasion of the meeting that we have come out of years of wild neoliberal policies. Everybody used to think that the economy had the capacity of self-regulating itself without the need to have Keynes style measures on the part of the central governments. Bernardo Mattarella is the head of Invitalia, in other words, an entity that is intended to support the economy with traditional methods. So my question to you is the following. Compared and within the framework of what we've heard so far, how is Invitalia working? How can it impact what is happening? Thanks for the kind invitation, and also thanks for your question. First of all, it's important to highlight that if we are to support the private initiatives, public measures, those public measures aimed at creating a favorable environment are always needed, are always necessary. In our view, it is important to see actually what the values are. The shocks we experienced over the last 2 years between the pandemic and the war in Ukraine have forced us to consider a framework based on sustainability, namely a social, environmental, and company and business and economic sustainability. This is something that we have been doing for quite a while. I used to work as a CEO of Mediocredito Centrale, and in 2019 we issued a social bond to be compelled to use these resources to support initiatives that were intended to have positive social initiatives, so socially sustainable initiatives. There's another interesting topic that recalls a concept that Minister Giorgetti well expressed before, is to focus on the environment in which businessmen work. That's at the very core of our attention. So this environment is an environment in which businessmen cannot work, and that's normally an environment characterized by fear. I was very much struck by the contribution by Cardinal Zuppi a couple of days ago when he talked about the fears starting from individualism, and when he expressed the fact that we are very weak, we feel fragile, we feel frail. In these conditions, in situations of weaknesses, companies find it difficult to work. Most of the times, we're not talking about individualism, but rather isolation. Social is sometimes alienating when it comes to this, with reference to the social media, and that leads to the alienation and isolation of the individual. And especially when it comes to the attitude, negative attitude that is sometimes expressed by public opinion, that has an impact on our society. The shocks we have lived should induce us to think that a more social approach is needed in order to avoid what Father Matteo called the spiritual desertification, which is a real economic and social desertification. If we are to overcome these problems, hence the title of this meeting, the person should be at the core of everything. So we should recover a real passion for the person. From our professional point of view, the person in this respect is the businessman, the worker, the employee, as well as the human being in general who daily lives in our society. We have always paid special attention to this, also because our tools have in a way led us to think so. And in particular, we've paid special attention to the development of younger people. We at Invitalia have an average age which is relatively young, around 40 to 42 years, and we are split in terms of gender, 50% women and 50% men. And we are aware of the fact that new generations are increasingly demanding solutions that are capable, that are future-oriented. I always like to mention a quote by Simone Weil, who used to say that the future is not giving us and is not bringing us something. It is us who have to give everything to the future to build the future. It is us who are called upon to build the future. This also leads us to have a special attention to all those who work in the third sector. Some days ago, a ministerial decree was signed setting aside 200 million euros for initiatives, the value of which is ranging between 100,000 and 10 million euros, that should be carried out by creative social enterprises who are intended to have significant effects at a social level. This is something that Invitalia is supporting. Invitalia, over the last 12 months, has supported public and private investments worth of nearly 25 billion euros. It has supported over 36,000 enterprises. It has used direct measures as well as securities. The securities managed by the Mediocredito Centrale, and this way it has enabled the circulation of cash worth of over 90 billion euros. There have been instruments like the development contracts that support major investments. And through these tools, it has created or maintained over 107,000 jobs, and it has also implemented tools for the setting up of new enterprises, startups, and smart enterprises, especially in the south of Italy, thereby enabling the creation of over 60,000 jobs among young people. All of this will have to be done within a context that is very much characterized by economic, social, and environmental sustainability.
Allora questo con una...
So we are perfectly within our time framework, so very good first part of our event. So the second question now is how and what can we do? So how can we make sure that the future will not be a crisis but a recovery? So let me start with Mr. Giacchi, who talked about the Italian companies. What shall Italian companies do in order to be drivers of development and to avoid these incomes to be focused and exported abroad? We are living in one of the Western countries with the most challenging context for companies. So, but let's try to forget that and let's try to imagine that we are all like all the other countries, so that we have no competition disadvantage. So the key and magic word for a businessman is growth. There is no company that can lay on a happy stagnation or on a decrease, even worse, a decrease. So a healthy company is a company which grows. And there are also consequences which come with the growth of the company, so higher productivity, higher salaries, and more job opportunities. So there are benefits that can come thanks to the achievement of these results. So let's try not to focus on the context, but not even on the fact that we need to work more in order to grow, because this is not true, because we are amongst the countries in terms of number of hours worked per every operator, which are the highest ones in the Western world. We are working more than the Germans, for example, which is considered to be a point of reference, but we are growing less than them. If we consider that from the point of view of the past, so considering what happened in the past, we grew less than them in terms of production. So the issue here is not how much we are working, but how we are working. So there are working models, and there's a way that other countries are relying on, which is more efficient than in Italy. So basically it means that in Italy we are working in a worse way than in the other countries, because with a higher number of worked hours we are achieving less than the other countries. So what do we need then? Again, considering and imagining a context which has no competition gap with the other, with respect to the other countries. So I think we need to focus on two main elements. First of all, the ideas, so the ability to innovate. I'm not saying we are not able to innovate, but we as a country, at the general level, of course there are exceptions, but at the general level as a country we are good in doing a specific kind of innovation, and we are not able to create a lack of continuity with our innovations. And an example concerns the field and the industry of advertisements. And this is one of the reasons why, despite having a digital offer, so we as Italian publishers, we have a digital offer available on the market, we are actually getting a lower part of the investment, lower than the other fields. So we are in that digital world, basically doing more or less the same things that we used to do before joining the digital world. So we were publishers before with the physical world, and we became digital publishers with a very similar model. And today, investments within this field are actually attracted by those who have been able to really innovate and to do something different from what they used to do before. Companies like Google, Instagram, TikTok, they created a model, they created products which were not present, which were not available before. So the first thing I'd like to share with you, and I feel it as a responsibility, as a stakeholder, in order to talk about a real growth, is that we need to improve our ability to generate an innovation which is different from what we used to do before. Then the second aspect concerns the skills. I often hear people talking about the fact that technology will destroy job opportunities. I completely disagree with this sentence, because this is not the technology which destroys job opportunities. Technology may destroy some skills or make them useless, and as a consequence, also some activities linked to those skills may become useless. But technology may also and will also generate new skills that were not available before and which are really needed today. And those skills are then demanded and required by the labor market. So the second aspect I'd like to stress is that in order to grow, we need to focus on skills. We need to rely on skills and to have the needed skills that are required today in order to face the future. And this is the way to be able to take benefits, to have benefits from that wealth which will become available due to these future developments, because for sure this will happen. Also in also in a context like the last 20 years, where we had to deal with the terrorist crisis, then the health crisis and financial crisis, and now a war. Despite all these issues and challenges, there's been a growth. There's been some wealth being developed, and today there is a benefit for those who are able to take advantage from this context. People relying on skills which are not present somewhere else. So despite being winners and let's say the number ones in a specific moment, we need to leave our status quo as a cage from which we shall try to escape, continuously escape, to profit from the opportunities that are growing. This is their responsibility for the companies.
E allora inevitabile le politiche del lavoro, perché
So we need to focus on the labor market. So what do you wish to the labor market, Marco Ceresa? What do you wish to the labor market for the future? Well, the first thing I wish is that we need to focus both on things that we need on the short term, so let's say in the next few months, and then for the things that we will need on the longer run. And the first thing I wish is that the new government, I hope it won't come and revolutionate our labor market, because this won't be a good approach. So I hope we won't have to deal with real revolutions. I hope it will for sure improve and increase some tools which are needed in order to guarantee a job to some people and to guarantee the human resources to the companies. We were saying earlier that we need a higher participation of younger people, women, people coming from the south who shall join the labor market. Well, I think that having the opportunity to reduce taxes for these cases, so for young people and women mainly, because in the south this has already been confirmed, so being able to have this incentive for recruiting this kind of people, I think this will be extremely helpful. Furthermore, I believe that in this period we shall do what they did in France and in Spain, so somehow making compulsory what we can define as the outplacement and the education and training of people getting out and leaving companies which are dealing with a period of crisis. So making sure that these people are not left alone to look for a new job. And we as a Randstad as well, we being, let's say, in the hands of a company that just says, well, I have this order, so I can offer only this job to you, which is good, okay, but it's better if we can say you don't have a job, so please, come here, I can help you with an education, a training, and the tools that you need in order to find a new job. Of course, this is something kind of easy, but this is not a revolution. And there are even smaller things, and here we are talking about, again, the demographic aspect, and I'm thinking to the Italian bank system, which is not granting any fund to people that have a permanent job through agencies, and I really cannot understand that. Because we decide to recruit people with a permanent job, being aware that these people, if they don't work for the company A, they may be good to work in a company B. And if there are people that, however, can rely on this income, well, I don't understand why they can't have access to this money from the banks. So I hope and I wish that there will be micro interventions which will allow us to solve problems and allowing more and more people to have access to the labor market. And then focusing on the longer term, I think that it's important to consider the entire school system. Well, the ITS is being very successful in this moment. We created those ITS, and I believe it's a very positive experience because with the companies, we are able to create in just a couple of years to develop a role of people that immediately after graduating at the high school, they can start working. So this is an education tool, an education option, not only for young people immediately after their high school, but they can also learn how to rely on some specific skills which can be useful for their working path. I was talking with a friend of mine who used to live in Dubai, and when she came back to Italy, her kids told her, well, we spend a lot of time to learn by heart the history of Romans and ancient Greece and so on, while there they start talking about history starting from the 20th century. So I'm not saying we shouldn't study old history, but I think that being able to get closer to the world of school with the relationship between school and the labor market, not only to teach subjects, but also to explain to young people what it means to actually work within a company, what it means to work with other people and to find a way to be able to live in a better way within your family. I believe this is what we will need both on the short term and on the longer term. And again, we don't need huge revolutions. And the very last point, the so-called reddito di cittadinanza, well, there are people that when they come to our agencies, well, I say to myself, where can I put this person? Where can they be recruited? So these people are the ones that actually need to be helped and supported. Otherwise, it's very hard for them to find a solution. But at the same time, there are also many people who don't want to go to work because they just receive this money without working. So I think that from this point of view, we don't actually need a revolution, but we need to work in order to make sure that those who can work shall work, while those who cannot do that somehow need to be supported. Let's move on with Bernardo Mattarella. It's very interesting, your approach about the public work. So shall we review and go back to the Italian Institute for Reconstruction or not? Again, I'm talking about the IRI, which was the institution that during the First Republic in Italy was intervening in the economical world in order to support the system. Well, I cannot tell you if we need a new IRI or not, but what we need for sure is a public intervention within economy with a very smart, rigorous and clear approach, and this intervention shall be then adapted according to the conjunctural needs that we have, and this is involving also what we will do in Italy in terms of incentives, in terms of industry approach and core business and so on. So this is what we need in this moment for the implementation of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. So this plan deals with investments which are not only public, but this is a booster also for private investments. In this moment, considering the data of July 2022, we are supporting initiatives for a total amount accounting for 65 billion euros. So talking about the investments on the short term for the NRRP, more than 22.5 billion euros account for the resources that Italy is directly managing. So how is Italy dealing with that? Basically with three main points. So managing the incentives. So we already have 19 incentives which have been implemented by Invitalia for an amount accounting for 4.5 billion euros. 7 will be shortly implemented through a series of tools for the support of new investments for big projects, to support women introduction within the business world, and agreement for the innovation. Then, with the Infratel company, we are implementing new infrastructure investments for an amount accounting for 6 billion euros. And with the function of public support for investments, we are supporting 14 central and local administrations which have already been involved within this process. And we already launched some tenders for an amount accounting for more than 6.5 billion euros. So we need to support as well the operational projects. We do the so-called project management, and we check and control all the reports for public investments. And based on the initiative of the Ministry for Public Education, since the beginning of this summer, we implemented the so-called Capacity Italy platform that provides an online support to the public administration, namely local public administrations that often didn't need that in the past, but that are not able to plan extraordinary interventions in terms of investments. And of course, we always need to have a sustainable approach to these measures aimed at implementing the two transitions we are living in, which have been speeded up by the pandemic, for sure. So talking about the ecological transition and the digital transition, which represent the core, which is at the beginning of the Next Generation EU program.
E allora...
So, to wind up, as a hope on the demographic level, how can we hope? I'm going to tell you now. I think that there can be three levers. First of all, newborns, migration, so mobility, we can term it this way, and then aging. Aging is not necessarily something negative. Let me start from the newborn. How can we relaunch births? There is a clear diagnosis. Children are not being born because children cost. They actually are sometimes... they sometimes cause incompatibility between professional engagements and personal engagements, and then technical problems. In 2008, there were 14 million women in fertile age, and now we've gone to 11.7. In 10 years' time, there will be 10.4 million women. In 30 years, nearly 9 million. So actually, we lack mothers. We've made a simulation at ISTAT, and the number of children per woman is 1.24. If it goes up to 1 to 5, actually, what with 1.24, we're going to have 250,000 newborns. If we go up to 1.5, we will have 350,000, even if the fertility increases. If we want to reach 2 children per woman, progressively, if that happens, we're going to reach 500,000 newborns. So actually, we lack mothers because, as was remembered, we still have to bear the brunt of the low fertility rates of the past. So there's a technical element. There are known problems we have to work. Again, we actually shouldn't wait 50 years to increase this rate to in 50 years' time. If we are quickly, we can still solve part of the problem. We have to increase the birth rate. We cannot expect to reach French levels, but we can do something more. And actually, there can be various actions on this. I'm not going to repeat things that you already know. And then there's another issue, that of mobility. Actually, on the one hand, we have to deal with migration, but there's also the issue of migration of young people going abroad. So actually, people who've done their degree and PhD and go abroad because actually going to work to the US or England or to Germany. And we have invested and trained people, young people, and then these people are going to work for our competitors. This is not nice. As regards migration, actually, of course, migration is very important. However, the forecasts I had in mind actually were based on 130,000 net migrants every year. We will be in spite of the 130,000 net migrants every year. We cannot compensate the 12 million missing with migration because we would add only additional 240,000. So 370,000 net migrants every year are not easy to integrate. So migration, a well-regulated migration flow is still something that can be taken into account. Then aging. The population pyramid is now a triangle. You have a wide base, and that is going to modify its shape because of the high number of elderly people. The people with over 90 years of age will be 1.7 million people in 20 years of age, and 2.2 million people in 40 years of age. So this is a problem. But actually, let us give a message of hope. Aging population. The aging population is a problem that is difficult to manage. Families are going to be weaker. Family welfare is be weaker because actually if you have just an only child, the situation is going to be difficult for the only child, and there will be the need of external support. However, aging is also silver economy. If you look at the flip side of the coin, there is a whole economy working for the elderly. So, for example, supplements to be more energetic, or cruise ship travels to the seas of the south, or deambulators, or, for example, ear prosthesis. These are things that make economy. For example, Italy, the Japanese, and the German have been the very first in the world to experiment these problems. And we also have companies which have understood how to build proper, correct ear prosthesis. And we have to exploit this. Also, the other countries will get old. China will also get old. Will have a very large number of elderly people. We have experience, and our companies have the experience of producing things that can meet these new needs, and we should promote these companies. Furthermore, we should not actually throw these elderly people away. Elderly people are active. They should have a healthy brain, so we should help promote these resources. It would be stupid, like sending our young people abroad, to actually prevent old people, elderly people who can do things, actually don't do them and just play bocce. And just play balls, basically. I think actually this is something that has been approved by lots of people, irrespective of their age. This is something that should take place. We can do this. And there's also the willingness to continue playing in the volunteering sector, but also in the productive sector. So this is a lever that we should apply. Thank you. Now, a question to Minister Giorgetti. What do you suggest that the future Minister for Economic Development does? Maybe he's going to remain in this position. You have 5 years ahead to invest in the new Italian development. First of all, I suggest that the next minister is better than me. I believe that we should start from a fact, which is what I mentioned before. Italy is a great country. We have to stop thinking that we are not that. We are the second biggest manufacturing country in Europe. If you travel around and meet companies, you can easily realize how strong they are, and you realize that they are basically keeping everything held together. If we start from this consideration, that is to say that it is the entrepreneur, the businessman that really does economic development, you can then realize that today it is time for change. And in times of change, you need investments. Investments are done during times of change, and investments are done either by private players or by public players. The choice at the basis, even the cultural choice that is needed, is that investments have to be done by businessmen, private businessmen. And in this situation, in this context of major change, private investors have to be supported by the state. Also in big countries like the United States of America, the state has supported private investments. They have created the infrastructures for capitalistic investments. So here lies the goal, the main goal of the NRRP. And it is necessary to identify the main avenues of investments. So the future Minister for Economic Development and Politics in general should question this issue. The NRRP sets aside a lot of money for reskilling people, so as to make sure that workers who are, so to say, expelled from mature sectors can be re-employed in future-oriented sectors. There's over 4 billion euros set aside for that. Then there's a huge amount of resources set aside that is much higher compared to the past in the field of research and university to promote education and to keep the intellectual skills of young people, of our young people here, of those young people who unfortunately have left the country over the last few years. And it also sets aside lots of resources on the main two avenues that we've often talked about, which are the main pillars of the NRRP, which is digital revolution and the environmental revolution. In doing so, the NRRP, and in particular politics, have to do their task. They have to understand what lies behind these revolutions so as to avoid the mistakes of the past. When we talk about digital revolution, we also have to also consider who's going to control cloud spaces. And we have to claim our sovereignty when you have the chance to do that. And today's choices are choices for the future, and they will make the difference when it comes to our autonomy. When we talk about energy transition and environmental revolution, well, this is something that my minister has fought for. So when we talk about revolutions connected to the automotive sector, we are not actually defending one type of engine compared to the other. But we cannot ignore that a large part of the raw materials and of the components making up an electric car and all the components used in many industries of this sector comes from a country that has the control, that is going to have the control of this raw material. So if we complain that we depend on Russia when it comes to energy, we cannot but say that we are blind. And if we're going blind towards only one direction, then in 10 to 20 years' time, there will be someone telling us that we are depending on China. And then if China decides to supply or not to supply certain semi-finished goods or certain raw materials, we won't be able to favor the photovoltaic sector or not. What I wish to say is that politics should not so much create financial resources, but it should rather create very important value for the businessman, which is optimism, so trust, and a climate that is in the long run, a long-run climate. Without this positive climate, any decision in investments cannot take place. And as we are in the electoral campaign, all politicians today have a very short-run vision, 30 days. Our objective today is to gain as many votes as possible. My vote is that on the 26th of September, we actually abandon this short-term politics and we really decide and govern looking to the future and reasoning in terms of long-run policy. Thank you very much. I would like to thank our interlocutors. They've been very brief. Let me just briefly conclude by saying that the NRRP has been often discussed at the Rimini meeting and has been the protagonist of the talk in 14 minutes. We're going to have Irene Tinagli, Mauro, and Enzo Moavero Milanesi, and Carlo Calenda. Second, this issue of optimism, of being positive, of the fact that there is nothing deterministic, is the fil rouge of this meeting. Prime Minister Draghi mentioned this yesterday. There was a very, very interesting point touched upon by all party leaders that has been mentioned by Cardinal Zuppi. We are here to say that a community that is working and acting is actually a people that can change history. So we have in our hands the responsibility of actually turning this situation into a crisis or into development. Italy actually can be a winning country when times are hard and tough. Thank you very much.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
L'energia non si muove da sola. C'è chi ogni giorno la fa viaggiare in tutto il paese attraverso il cielo, il mare e la terra. L'energia non alimenta solo il presente. C'è chi da anni ne guida la gestione per dar vita a un futuro veramente sostenibile. Perché l'energia è un diritto di tutti. È il nostro dovere ogni giorno. Terna, Driving Energy. L'energia non si muove da sola. C'è chi ogni giorno la fa viaggiare in tutto il paese attraverso il cielo, il mare e la terra. L'energia non alimenta solo il presente. C'è chi da anni ne guida la gestione per dar vita a un futuro veramente sostenibile. Perché l'energia è un diritto di tutti. È il nostro dovere ogni giorno. Terna, Driving Energy.